Okay, so when I say the word minstrel, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm willing to bet it's a very specific and, a very romantic image.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's this, right? This lone figure, maybe he's got a feather in his cap, strolling through the forest, or serenading someone under a castle window. It's an image we all kind of know from movies and fairy tales.
And look, it's a great image, don't get me wrong, but is it the whole story? Not even close. It's actually just a tiny, polished corner of a much bigger, messier, and frankly, way more interesting picture.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The reality of the medieval minstrel was so much more complex. I mean, these people were celebrated one minute and despised the next. They were absolutely essential to the culture, but at the same time, they were often living on the legal fringes of society.
So, the first thing we got to get our heads around is that minstrel wasn't just one job. It was this huge social spectrum stretching all the way from the fanciest royal courts in Europe down to the loneliest, dustiest roads. You can basically think of it like a social ladder. Right at the very top, you had your elite performers living and working in royal courts. In the middle, you had established professionals working in towns. And then way down at the bottom, you had the wandering entertainers just trying to get by on the open road. And let me tell you, the gap between the top and the bottom, it was huge. A retained minstrel was a respected member of a noble household. They got a salary, nice clothes, a roof over their head, security. But a wandering minstrel? Legally, they were considered a vagabond. They had virtually no rights, no protection, and no idea where their next meal was coming from. All right, I'm going to throw a number at you. 175. Any guesses what that could be? That's the number of minstrels who got paid for a single party thrown by King Edward I of England. So forget that image of the lone guy with a lute. At the highest levels, this was a massive organized profession. This was like a full-blown festival orchestra.
And then you've got that middle ground, the town musicians. They were trying to get organized, They formed guilds, just like a blacksmith or a carpenter would, to try and set some professional standards, control the local market, and, get a little respect.
All right, so we've got the social hierarchy down. But what were these people actually doing all day? Well, it was a whole lot more than just playing music. Just look at this resume. It's wild. Your average wandering performer, the jongleur, was basically a walking, talking, one-person entertainment industry. They were jugglers, acrobats, magicians. They trained animals. They told these epic stories. They were the ones spreading the news. Oh, and on top of all that, they were also musicians. Talk about versatile. And this quote, this is perfect. It reframes everything. In a world with no printing press, no internet, no 24-hour news, they were the media. They were the ones carrying stories, songs, and news from village to village. They were literally the glue holding popular culture together. Okay, so this brings us to this huge contradiction, right at the heart of the minstrel's life. How could you be so important to culture, so essential, and at the same time be so deeply mistrusted by society? Well, the answer is kind of buried in these two totally conflicting ideas the medieval world inherited. From the Romans, they got this legal concept of infamia, or infamy, which basically lumped performers in with criminals and outcasts. But from the Germanic tribes, they got the idea of the scope, the court poet, who was this incredibly honored, respected figure in the king's hall. And you know who was stuck right in the middle of this mess? The church. On one hand, church leaders condemned minstrels for being idle, for stirring up lust, for being deceptive, and especially for their rootless, wandering lifestyle. But, on the other hand, the church itself and its biggest patrons needed musicians for festivals, for holidays, even for church services. It was a real can't live with them, can't live without them situation. And when the church condemned them, they did not hold back. I mean, listen to this. One very influential writer said that minstrels had literally given themselves over to Satan. Just think about that for a second. Your job, your very profession, could get you denied a Christian burial, which in the medieval world was just about the most terrifying thing that could happen to you. So, after all that, where do we land? What's the real story here? The minstrel's actual legacy, when we look past the romantic myth. I think a better way to think about them is as professional cultural workers. And here's the real kicker. Their cultural power, the thing that made them so important, came directly from their weird, marginal place in society. Yeah, it all boils down to this one incredible idea. It was because they were outsiders, because they didn't fit into the neat social boxes, that they had this unique freedom. They could travel anywhere, carry news across borders, make fun of a powerful lord in a song, and keep the culture's stories alive for everyone. Their outsider status wasn't a bug, it was a feature. It was their superpower.
And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on, doesn't it? A professional artist, loved for their talent, but maybe looked out with a little suspicion for their unconventional lifestyle. Does that sound at all familiar? This tension between society and the performer, well, it definitely didn't end in the Middle Ages.